speak normally, in a normal volume, and I'll try and gauge everything off and balance people out. We do use my stream audio for Spotify and YouTube. Now, let's just go down the list and start with Guy.
Hello? Is my mic working? Hello?
Yeah. All right. Let's just talk about what your plans are for the start of the patch week.
Like me specifically?
Yeah. We'll just go down the list. That'll be our sound check.
So I actually have no idea what any of the systems are for the patch. I have no idea how the new zone works. I know how nothing works. All I know about is how my class works. So I'm gonna go into Discord.
Right,
I'm gonna say, hey, I don't know what to do. Like, which rares do I kill? And then somebody's gonna tell me, and that's how I'm gonna know what to do.
Nice. That's really chill. Sally, what about you?
I'm gonna push tier 3 on my Lost Ark character on my reroll. But memes aside,
Loud.
I think I'm gonna take it fairly chill. So it'll mostly be just seeing what daily content needs to be done. But since it's very friendly towards new players or people who are not spending like 10 hours a day on the game, so you'll definitely hit the reputation requirements as like just doing dailies. And even being able to skip some dailies, I'll probably take it chill, see what develops, and then adjust based on the newest findings and everything.
Yeah. I honestly don't know how the new zones work either. I've mostly just been like, obviously I know enough to like do the wowhead stuff and like adjust things, but aside from that, I'm not entirely sure what's going on. Especially because they keep changing the rep like every other week. They're like, oh, you need to kill every rare every single day for the rest of your life. And then it's like, oh, well, now you don't have to kill any rares. Time gated, but then it's not time gated. So I'm just probably going to chill and do whatever content I need to do, Mythic Plus. And then once that's done, I'm going to go in and do more Path of Exile because I'm having a lot of fun this league. Exile's a great game.
That's actually why you'd never read what anything in the patch does, because like every 2 days there's like a wowhead post and it goes like, they've changed the zone, you now need to kill every rare. It's like, dude, if you just never read, you actually just never know. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, Ram, what are your plans? I know you don't play PTR much.
Yeah, honestly, I have a very similar approach to like new patches like Guy. I just don't look up stuff ahead of time. I just take it as it comes. And for 9.2, I've just heard that it's going to be quite chill and lax. So I don't know. I'm not too worried about it. I'm just kind of just looking forward to the M plus grind, like when it comes to just gear, like the early gear farm. It's quite fun. It sounds crazy, but I've also like done a lot of farming in BFA, so I'm used to it. I just find it fun, you know?
Yep. And then James, Mr. World First himself.
Well, I do have quite a bit of work to do next week, but it's mainly just because I have so many characters. But, I mean, the main thing I have to do is just, I got to do the story campaign on one guy, pretty much skip it on all the other guys, and then I got to kill 3 world bosses per day, and that's about it. Or not kill 3 world, it's 3 world quests, 3 world quests per day. And, yeah, got to make sure I got all my renown and stuff ready to go. But not too much, it's pretty chill.
Yeah, this patch is looking pretty good. All right, let us get it started. Hitting start event, and it's doing nothing.
There we go.
I almost pinged everyone like 3 times. That's kind of scary. So, welcome to episode 3 of the Tricks of the Trade podcast. This episode is titled Pushing Perspectives. We're going to be talking with JPC and Ramfam about the new patch, 9.2, Mythic Plus, overarching ideas with Mythic Plus, and kind of how to think about it. Hopefully a lot of good content. So I just want to jump right into it with the Mythic Plus stuff. 9.2. Obviously, with 9.2, it's a new Mythic Plus season. We got the encrypted stuff, the new seasonal affix. So for those who aren't aware, if someone wants to grab up and explain it really quickly how it works, maybe Seli, and just talk about it, how it affects the rogue kind of meta, and all that.
Sure. So basically, like throughout the dungeon, you will see like these relics in certain like trash packs, and on bosses, sometimes you won't be able to see them, and they will just spawn as you engage the boss. And then they buff the enemies they surround, and then you gotta take care of them very quickly. And the first one you kill will decide on a mob that will spawn, like kind of a mini boss. They're not as threatening or problematic as the tormentors we had in the previous season. And then once you kill that one, you get a buff, and that buff is somewhat significant. It can help you kill things faster, or even, let you run faster, take less damage. So you'll always have to decide whenever you encounter one of these groups of relics which one you want to get, and that will be the main problem, I think, is groups slowly figuring out, okay, the best route now. Do you want to avoid them as much as possible? Do you want to get as many of them as possible? So there will be a lot of figuring out to do, depending on which buff we want to get. And yeah, I mean, one of them actually replaces Rogue a little bit, because when you kill one of the relics, I have forgot the name. I think it's the Ore relic. You get a movement speed buff, as well as if you drop combat, you get a stealth. So it basically works like a shroud, and you get a movement speed buff. So you kind of got to be a little bit worried about our shroud utility, because it essentially gets replaced by a shroud that also gives a movement speed buff.
I think something to keep in mind for that is that any sentiment regarding Shroud is losing viability. I remember in Nilotha, when they added the pillars, which effectively just let you make portals from anywhere to the map. And, Shroud sounded like, oh, Shroud's dead, you don't need Shroud anymore. You can just make your own Shrouds. And then Rogue was core for every single dungeon in all of BFA in Season 3. So I expect it to kind of remain the same, because, like, Shroud you can kind of use anywhere. And, like, these Shroud... Are they permanent, or how long do the buffs last?
Depends on a buff. One of them only lasts 10 seconds. It's a cooldown reduction one. And then the others are 40 seconds each, if I remember correctly. One of them gives like a small bloodlust, like 15% haste. And the other one is the movement speed and damage reduction.
Okay. I feel like Shroud is just too universally useful, where I can't imagine Shroud getting much less useful, but maybe somebody else knows more.
Wait, did you say it's 40-second Shroud buff that you get?
Let me double check that, but yeah.
I think
James probably knows best. I'm guessing he played, like, James, you played a lot
I did play a bit of PTR. They did make some changes, and I haven't played since those changes. But last I remember, the Shroud was not...
It sounds like a lot.
The move speed was 40 seconds, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
The Shroud buff is only 10 seconds, I think.
It's 20 now, actually. I just changed it. Woe now also grants 15% damage reduction for the duration of the effect. You auto stealth anytime you're not in combat, and duration reduced to 20 seconds.
Yeah.
But that's still 20-second Shroud
right.
is good.
I mean, yeah, still, it's another Shroud, right?
Yeah.
The good thing this
Maybe
patch isn't tomorrow.
Maybe.
I think the main use for that one would be like in the situation, like in DOS, for example, where you kill one of those packs at the bottom of the stairs, and then you have to go into the wing, right? Normally it's like a 30-40 second run to go into the wing, and you can't mount once you're inside, right? So a lot of times the movement and you don't really benefit from the haste, because you still have the haste buff up after you kill the pack, so you're not really getting value out of it, right? So I think that's the main time you would go for something like that, unless your group didn't have a rogue. But I mean, I assume everyone here's playing rogue. But
the main thing that I'm looking at is the combining both of them, right? So I mean, sure, you get a 20-second Shroud from the relic, but then you can add the rogue one on top, and 30-second of Shroud might allow for some nifty skips that we currently were unable to do.
All I've learned is that when there's a affix that is similar to Shroud, people just find ways to abuse Shroud even more. So that's that's what I'm expecting anyway.
Yeah, but the other thing is there's 3 buffs, right? So there's the haste buff, there's the cooldown buff, and then there's the Shroud buff. what's the power level that we're talking about here? Because I feel like if you bring a rogue and there's not like any like gigabrain 30-second shroud skip, uh if there's not something like that where it's really really strong, I feel like you just wouldn't take the shroud buff a lot of the time because you would just rather have the cooldowns and just blast. Um, because I feel like a lot of the Shadowlands dungeons specifically don't have a lot of opportunities to have like, oh, we could skip more if we had another shroud here, or we need to invis pot. They feel very linear to me. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure if you would ever like just take it for free. Like you wouldn't be like, oh, a shroud, nice, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the main issue I think is if you have a pack and you know you want the shroud power after, then why not just shroud that pack and not
Yeah.
have to deal with the relics at all,
Exactly.
right? So unless there's literally a reason for count purposes or other concerns that you want to engage with that pack, I mean, why do you want to have to kill a pack to gain a shroud when you can just use the rogue shroud and get past that pack and not even have to play it?
Yeah, the only thing I could think in the another example would be in DOS. You guys know in Mechagon there's like the dog and all the guys that spin around.
Yeah.
There's one in that pack as well. So if you were going to lose uptime on the haste buff or the CDR buff or something like that because you don't want to focus the seasonal affix because they're sort of like wasted damage. Like if you can cleave it, if that makes sense, then you can save the shroud there and potentially use it somewhere else because you'd kill the pack anyways, right? But it's I think most of the time you're not going to be killing that one.
Yeah, I think the if you kill it, you'll probably kill for the damage reduction, but I feel like 20 seconds of damage reduction is kind of way too weak as well. I know how Ram feels about it, but like when they first introduced the affix, I felt like there was no way you're ever gonna play anything but the haste, right? And like while they buffed the other ones and they nerfed the haste, I still feel like, to me personally, just thinking about it, getting cooldown reduction, it's not that, like, the cooldown reduction isn't that big. It's like 20 seconds of cooldown reduction. So getting like 2 minutes on your Vendetta, or even if you play Dusk and everything, like 40-second or 60-second cooldown doesn't really make a big difference. Damage reduction, movement speed, shroud, it's all kind of not comparable to a Bloodlust. And
Yeah. I mean, do you know if it affects Covenant abilities, the CDR, or is it only like normal base abilities? It's okay, so it's Covenant.
It works like the corruption we had in season 4 last season, where it's like
what's
every
it called?
second that
Ineffable
passes,
Truth.
you actually lose 3 seconds off your cooldown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but it only lasts 10 seconds.
The thing is, it's actually like, I don't know if they're going to fix it, but the CDR for your Covenant ability, I don't know if it's by intention or not, but you're getting significantly more than what you get on all your other abilities by like a lot.
Yeah, there were some bugs with it, right?
Yeah, with flag, like you can flag and then literally flag again like 10 seconds later.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably some wonky how do you call it? Like synergy, right, with the CDR on top of CDR.
It's for everybody. Like classes even without CDR.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like you're getting like 90 or what is it? 60 seconds of CDR on your thing. So like shaman can like mages can do shifting power just over and over and over. And and stuff like that. So
the Ram mage is looking hot.
Yeah. I will see. It's just an alt for now. It's a split character, my mage. I'll still be maining rogue to begin with at least. We never know.
I've heard that before, okay? It's just an alt. I'm still a main rogue.
Yeah, that's how Guy became an enhancement shaman main again.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's how half the Discord re-rolling to warrior for the shout.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a natural progression coming from Outlaw, right? You play rogue, and then you play Outlaw, and then you play warrior.
Yeah, you switch to the best rogue spec, and then you play warrior because it's basically just a rogue spec, except it does rally.
With raid utility, exactly.
So that being said, I know Seli mentioned that there's going to be a lot of haste uptime picks probably. You were talking about that. Do you guys think, especially Ram and James, for like the higher end keys, the 29s and the 30s out there, you guys think that will have an impact on like a raid, not a raid, like a dungeon composition? Like Are you going to take a different healer because now you have Spirit Link cooldown? Or are you going to maybe consider taking, like a Boomkin? Or maybe you want to just juice the haste buff, and so you take something that's haste. Have you guys thought about that already? And like any insight onto what the comps might look like next patch?
I have given it some thought. I think in general, the classes that look good to be the like third DPS, right? Aside from Mage and Rogue, in general, they're all already good with the haste buff. So it's not necessarily like where you would pick them for the haste buff or anything. They just happen to benefit from that. But I think like the biggest, I don't know. I think the biggest thing about next season will be the increase on the dungeon timer because you don't have to spend like 4 minutes of every dungeon killing these things, right? Because you can just passively cleave down the seasonal affix. So I think, pretty much all the classes you could think of, like Warlock, Fury Warrior, Survival Hunter, these all scale well with the haste buff. So
I think it's just a case of like, or at least in my opinion, it sounds like a case of just like you're gonna pick the broken specs, and then the broken specs usually do well with haste, and then yeah, you're not really like, oh, this class is exceptionally good with haste. Let's bring a bad class to make it like decent sometimes.
Yeah,
and, when I could just give Bloodlust to any class, and a Bloodlusted class is usually pretty good.
Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, since I haven't spent much time on the PTR, actually, like no time at all, I haven't given it much thought. So for me, it's probably just gonna come down to like trial and error, like just pugging and seeing, or just playing with different people, like trying different specs and whatnot. I mean, I think it is like James says regarding the haste. The most of the good specs, apart from like Sub Rogue and like I guess Outlaw Rogue, just other classes in general, they usually have haste as a good stat, so you'll get value like from pretty much every spec in the game. I feel like there's not really any spec that I think is bad with haste necessarily. So
which class is like, don't Bloodlust me, please?
Yeah.
Depends a bit on the situation, right? Like I think there's a difference there between a class like Boomkin or Warlock gaining a Bloodlust on AoE, for example, and something like Subrogue or Assassination.
Yeah, exactly.
If the 30% haste basically equate to a 30% damage increase, you're kind of a bad Bloodlust class, right? If it significantly increases your resource generation, so you gain much more value out of it, and it's not just like a 30% damage amp directly, but way more, then especially when stacked up with other cooldowns, I think that's where it really starts to shine. So maybe it's not necessarily just that it like the classes that scale well with haste, but instead just classes that have really powerful cooldowns. So having yet another cooldown or temporary buff at least, be able to stack on top of that just kind of makes it go absolutely mental. Like to me, when a new season starts, it always feels like people are afraid of trying out new stuff. So I think going into the next season, we'll probably just see a lot of what we see right now, and then it'll take people a couple of weeks to figure out the affix. That will not happen until progression is over for a lot of people, and then slowly people will start to understand and get a better grip on the seasonal affix and how to best utilize it. I mean, we all thought that Boomy was entirely broken this patch at the beginning, right? And no group wanted to go without a Boomy, and at the end, kind of no one wanted a Boomy anymore. So there's some natural development there over time, I think, as well. And when it comes to really utilizing the seasonal affix as best as possible, that won't happen until 3-4 months into the season, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Once you have like double legendary, like full tier set, etc., and people have tried like what combinations, like which of these mini bosses or whatever, like what to
and
kill.
have it on ults as well.
There's
right?
gonna be new routes as well.
Yeah, like the routing and the alt situation, I think, is always an issue there when it comes to Mythic Plus in particular. It's just because you don't really like when you're playing in a group and you feel like one class is too weak, you don't replace that player and get another player. And some people do, but usually you try to give people a chance to just play a different character, but stay with the same 5 people. And so having geared alts be able to switch in is a really big part of M+ pushing, at least from my experience. Because if you don't have an alt, then either you get replaced or you're kind of locked into a suboptimal comp a lot of times. And Yeah, as Ram just said, like you kind of need a lot of time to not just gear up your main, because that usually happens fairly quickly during progression. But if you want to try out different classes with the same group that you're comfortable playing with, you also need to get your alts up, and that is greatly reliant on just the design of the patch itself. Like how easy is it to acquire tier sets on alts? How easy is it to acquire, the double legendaries or any other potential power gains? So yeah, I mean 9.2 is looking to be better on that end, at least compared to Sanctum.
Kind of to piggyback off of that, the importance of rating for Mythic Plus gear has kind of been increasing more and more. Before, in BFA you had Azerite, but a lot of Azerite was actually really good. Like you're thinking of like the Gorak tool shoulders, right? But this expansion especially, we've seen a lot of raid only borrowed power, especially in 9.1, where you could not get shards whatsoever from Mythic Plus. You had to raid for those. So like you had the defensive power of Kier, or a couple extra % of damage from Beck and D's, and all those kinds of stuff. In 9.2, tier set is acquirable through Mythic Plus and PvP, but do you guys think that the importance of raiding for, say, trinkets, early set bonuses, or some other sort of crazy items, high item level daggers, for example, do you think that's going to be an important distinction between people who just run Mythic Plus and people who also push raid at a high end? And what do you think about the general sort of way that this is going, where you have to raid in order to be optimal?
Has it at all been a consideration for you, James, when you decided to join Liquid, that it will allow you to just gear up faster and push earlier?
No, that wasn't really my main thought about it, because a lot of times, even in my old guild, by the time you were fully geared, like, yeah, maybe I can gear up slightly faster, but maybe it's a difference of 3 or 4 weeks. And at that point, in like maybe 2 months into the upcoming patch or 3 months into the upcoming patch, people still won't be like fully optimal, I'd say, or at least they're generally not. Like you continue to see higher and higher keys done the later the season goes on. So it's not like it's all that important to be super optimal, like fully geared bis in like 2 months or anything like that. So I never really thought about that at all. But I'd say in general, this patch, it's probably relatively less important to raid than last patch, because so long as you have patience, like so long as you're willing to wait, the additional time that you need to, because you're not raiding in order to get your tier gear, the only difference really is going to be item level. I mean, I guess that assumes that you have 2 Mythic Sylvanas daggers, which of course not everybody does, but as far as trinkets go from the raid, there's only like really 2 that I would see that would be like crazy in M+. Of course, they're not all implemented, but
Which are?
there's one off the Jailer, which is like you put a spike in the target, it stores up a bunch of damage, and then when you move away from the target, you could like Shadow Step the healer or something, it explodes and it does all the damage to everything around it, and it's shadow damage. So that's kind of like an AoE type trinket. And then there's like an Earthquake one, which basically procs these like earthquakes, and then if you run over the earthquake on the ground, it like explodes it and it does AoE damage. I mean, so yeah, like in last patch you had the 7 item level difference from the end bosses, and you had like quite a bit of damage coming from like the Frost Gem and the Shard of D's and the Execute and all this. But in the next patch, it's only the item level, right? Because eventually you'll get all your tier gear even if you don't raid. So
there's one kind of insane item that I've seen 0 people talk about. Is there is a neck from raid that just has 300 secondaries. It's like I don't know what it is based on the item level, but it gives you 3 stats instead of 2 stats, and it gives infinite. So that's going to be a really insane neck. I think it drops off.
So it's just like
30%
more stats, like secondaries.
I think they're tuned down.
I was looking at it compared to the 259 necklace, and it only had like 40 more secondary stat. But that was 259 versus 259. So if it was 285, versus.
It's a slightly higher item level because it drops off the last 2 or 3, so it's going to be a higher item level. And then maybe it's the same total stat budget, but it's still going to be higher.
It's more stat budget.
Infinite stats.
It's more stat, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that deck is going to be very good.
Yeah.
I
So
think
your
tier
legendary-
sets are still going to be an issue, right? Like 3 tier set pieces being higher eye level than the rest that you can only get through raid, because even if you get the tier set through M plus or PvP, you can't upgrade them as high as those last 3 pieces.
Oh, but that's not any more like relatively different than it is now,
More
right?
stamina usually matters. I don't know how you guys feel about the entire, like higher item level, stamina, and tertiary stat situation. Personally, like I got like lucky enough. I mean, I'm on the loot counts on my guild, but still, I got lucky enough to have like 12% avoidance, like 14% reach on my
Corrupted.
gear, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that these things like higher item level just for like 500, 1,000 extra HP, and like having a little bit of extra avoidance matter a lot? Because I mean, just thinking about like theater, the Zav, the stomp that he does, like when he jumps in the middle, like that stuff, like basically one shots unless you have like a big mitigation cooldown up every time. I feel like there's a few bosses where the difference between having like 1,000 HP more or less can actually be the difference between you getting one shot and not getting one shot. Do you think that's going to be an issue at all? Especially considering that we've kind of moved away a little bit from Fortify being the better push week, right? It feels like Tyrannical has moved into an environment where it's easier to push. And I don't know if that has something to do with environmental damage scaling with Fortified instead of Tyrannical. And so a lot of these like really hard-hitting abilities actually hurt less on Tyrannical than they did on Fortified.
Yeah. When it comes to Tetris set, I'm like probably the biggest fiend when it comes to avoidance. Like maybe you guys know. I think regarding the extra eye level of like the last 3 bosses in raid, it's like it is like you kind of need it, but you only need it if you're like really pushing the key limit, right? Like then
Yeah.
it really matters to have like more HP and whatnot. But for most people, like having just what is 246 now, equivalent of next patch, like M plus gear with Tetris stat is very, very strong. Just having like leech, avoidance, like all of that, it really adds up. Because like imagine just having like at one point I had 20% avoidance on my gear back when the Shard of Tel was not working. So I swapped my Lego from cloak to head, and I had 20% avoidance baseline, and that is just absolutely crazy to take like 20% less damage. Imagine the first boss in Sanguine Depths, like the charge, the ball explosions, and like you said, Sav, like just taking permanently less damage from AoE. It's really insane. Like Leech and stuff, it's also good on DPS, but I mean it's even obviously more value on like healers and stuff and like tanks. But yeah, Tetris it's just very strong.
The fact that it works with Feint as well is just nuts. Like rogues are so immune to damage right now. It's insane.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Did you get funneled in your raids, like both of you? Like, did they, because you were pushing keys at that level, were people saying, hey, I don't really need this avoidance piece, but I know it's really big for you. I don't really need this leech because I'm only in farm mode anyway. You take it because it allows you to push better, essentially. Was it ever a consideration in your guilds, or do you basically, raid for raiding's sake, and then if plus comes as an afterthought?
Honestly, I don't remember any instance where I've gotten funneled Tetris stat unless there's like no one needed it, or like it was like an eye level upgrade, then it's like different, right? But if it was just like Tetris upgrade, I don't think I've ever gotten funneled really. Just because I'm like pushing keys. I remember losing a pair of boots, like because we usually just roll that stuff out, especially if it's like Tetris just upgrade, not eye level upgrade.
For me, I do give funneled tertiaries, but it's like as a last priority. So if any of the tertiaries would be better for the raid as a whole, then they go to that person. But if for whatever reason, like somebody happens to already have that, like for instance, almost all of the healers, even on all their alts, have like they have like 20% leech. So in the beginning, like if leech was dropping, then I would not get it and it would go to the healer. But towards the end, once they were like saturated on all their tertiaries, then I start to get some, yeah. But if it was like just the case of like avoidance going to a rogue or a havoc demon hunter, then in those cases I usually will get it. But yeah, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I do agree with that. When it comes to like later in the season or like later in the tier rather, I guess you're more likely to be able to get stuff. But at least in our guild, when it comes to leech, it's basically always going to the healers.
Yeah.
If it's speed and avoidance, then it can go to everyone. And like early progress, there will be definitely like there's not going to be like, oh, you can get this because you're going to push keys in 4 months. You know, that's not really a thing.
For sure.
So it's more like later in the tier than it's like a possibility, you know, of getting.
Basically when gearing decisions are kind of moving into it's whatever direction because content is clear and
when it's like farm almost close to farm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't rate at any level close to you guys, but it's a similar thing with us, honestly, where kind of tertiary stats is, oh, if it has avoidance, cool, who wants this? But all the leech goes to the healers basically instantly. Like if it has leech and it's a ring, for example, that like anyone can equip, it's never going to a DPS, right? Like there is no world where a ring with leech ever goes to it. And I feel like avoidance and speed is just kind of an afterthought mostly. Like avoidance is really, really strong, as Ram said in Mythic Plus, but it's not something that it's actively sort of like, oh, it has avoidance. Who's our big key pusher? That person would probably want this. It's more of like okay, well, it dropped with avoidance. If someone needs it, they need it. But if they just want the avoidance, it's whatever. I feel like, I don't know, tertiaries are in a weird spot where speed is kind of just there. And like even Indestructible still exists.
Yeah.
And like I feel like there's a very weird kind of difference where avoidance is really strong, leech is very strong, and then speed is whatever, and Indestructible is kind of non-existent. Like
I do think speed is underrated.
Yes.
In raids in particular, I think a lot of people are missing out not running the 5% movement speed gem, for example, or the one that gives you like more speed based on how many Shadowlands gems you have equipped. Hopefully the new creation catalyst system kind of alleviates some of these issues because it basically allows you to upgrade any item to a set piece, right? And then it keeps a tertiary stat. So you don't have to like pray to get this item that has the perfect tertiary. It even keeps the socket if it has one. At least it's supposed to. But yeah, I was really unhappy when I opened my Great Vault and I saw Sylvanas Dagger the same week. I finally got my second one in like week 13 of killing her. And then I open Great Vault and I see the Sylvanas Dagger pop up and I see the green arrow that indicates, you got a tertiary proc. I was already pretty hyped and then I was indestructible.
Oh no.
I mean, that's kind of a feels bad moment, right?
I think I get a Sylvanas Dagger, yeah.
My first dagger I pulled out of Vault had leech on it, and I was pogging out, man.
And then you got like what, 7 more within the next like 3 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, I had in 7 vaults I got 6 daggers.
Mythic ones?
One was heroic because we didn't
it was
raid
only
that week
6 mythic daggers.
What the hell?
I also looted a mythic dagger. So basically 7 vaults are 5 mythic daggers, 1 heroic, and then I looted. And the one I looted was on the week where the vaults didn't give me one. So I basically had 7 weeks in a row of just Sylv daggers in my inventory.
That's crazy. So that's
how
where
many
all the
weeks did it take each of you to get them?
Yeah.
Like Ram and James, like how much time did it take you to get the second mythic dagger?
I think I have my second mythic dagger by the. Well, I guess because we took 2 weeks to kill the boss, it's basically the 4th week of mythic, I think. So pretty quick, yeah. I didn't get one on the first kill, but I got one on the second kill, and then I got one on the vault the week after that. So yeah.
Oh, so you cheated.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Actually cheating.
Yeah.
What about you, Ram?
Honestly, when it comes to the daggers, I don't have memory when I got them, but I do remember getting, was it 3 daggers within the span of 4 or 5 weeks, and they all came from the vault. And
Yeah.
like at the start of the season, right? I wasn't sure what I was gonna play in terms of M plus and like pushing, so I was actually having my monk in the main raid, and my rogue was only in for alt raid and doing 6 bosses, and I got all the daggers from just doing 6 bosses on alt raid, and eventually I just got them
Okay.
from the vault.
Yeah, like I got my second one like week 13, which kind of gave me an excuse to not play Assassination in M+. To not play Subtlety in M+ until I got the second dagger, because I didn't have one on Heroic either. So it was actually almost 3 months for me to get a second Sylvanas dagger, and with how important they are for the Subtlety DPS output in Mythic Plus, it felt kind of crazy. So I'm hoping, like, since we were talking about like gear in general, I'm hoping that none of the raid items this time around will be so crucial to really living up to our DPS potential in Mythic Plus anymore. I think the dagger design overall was really solid. Sadly, it was way too good for Subtlety compared to Assassination and Outlaw in particular, especially with Outlaw being unable to wield a second dagger in the first place. But
I mean,
yeah,
we
like,
got Vein Rip at least.
yeah,
for
like
pure sanitary
James
purpose.
said earlier, I am a bit concerned about, like the trinket from Jailer dealing shadow damage. Because I
Oh,
think so far, looking at the specs going into the next season of Mythic Plus, I feel there's a lot of room for every one of the rogue specs right now. With the new seasonal affix, you can MFD the relics, so you can get even on a boss, you can get 3 MFDs off for sure, just by killing the relics, which is pretty significant cooldown reduction already. If you play Outlaw, and then I mean, it's decent. It's a decent funnel situation for a while. For Assassination, if you don't kill the big ad, you get a constant 2 target for resource generation as well. So it feels going into the patch, all 3 specs might see some play, and I am concerned about just some situations similar to Edge of Night, kind of pushing us towards Subtlety again. Are you
Yeah,
guys
the
planning on
trinket's
trying out
also
all the other rogue specs going into the next patch?
for M plus.
Yeah,
Mhm.
4 plus.
Yeah, I will play all of them for sure. Especially like whenever my team's not doing keys and it's like the weekly keys, just for especially at the very beginning, like during heroic week, right? I got to do 10 and plus keys with my guys and stuff. I'll for sure be trying out all the different 4 pieces and stuff and 2 legendaries.
James,
But-
have you heard about the new Outlaw technology yet?
No, what's that?
So like the best
Oh.
legendary with double legendary is Shadow Dust.
No way,
So like
dude.
you press Echoing Reprimand in a pack, right? It takes 15 seconds off, so it's a 30-second cooldown. Then you vanish, it takes it down to 10. You go Reverberation for more cast damage, and all you do is just spam the cast, and that's all you do.
That's crazy. And then you get the CDR to get
Yep, you
your
get-
vanish
yep.
back even faster. Wow.
Yup.
That's pretty funny.
yeah, that's probably the most fun like new
Yeah.
spec that I'm really just looking forward to play in M+. Even though the numbers right now, which is totally irrelevant for like what the actual end product will be in like
Yeah.
months, right? I don't know, like having CDR in M+, it's just honestly, it's just a dream. It's just more fun, more buttons to press, more utility, more stunts, like more everything. I don't know. I'm
And,
just very extremely hyped for that, for sure.
Yeah, and Echoing Reprimand gives you infinite energy because it costs 10 and then it gives you 3 combo points. Like, it's such an efficient builder and it has no cooldown. Effusive Anima Accelerator is uncapped, which, people love uncapped abilities, so that, finally can compete with Sub-Rogue with that. It's busted.
That's a
Yeah.
hard cope though, being able to compete with sub-rogues, don't you
Yes.
think?
I mean, the funnel seems really good though, right? Like
Yeah,
the
it seems like
small
good cryo
urns or
damage for
whatever.
sure.
Yeah, I
It's-
don't know.
I am
I'm
a bit
concerned.
concerned
Low-key.
though.
Low key, high key, it's the nuts.
Yeah, I do think that you just said something that kind of worries me though, right? It's prio damage again. So we have Assassination with the 2-piece and the 4-piece, and playing Dusk even in AoE environments probably, giving a lot of prio damage. And then you have Outlaw with the secret tech, giving a lot of prio damage. And then you have Sub with the natural prio damage utility. Do you think that might be an issue in terms of just every spec kind of filling the same niche instead of being able to say, for example, right now, you go into a theater because it's it's not that great of a subtlety dungeon. You usually play the Assassination or Outlaw there if you can, or if you want to. Sub is still fine, but I do feel personally that the other two specs are kind of better in that dungeon. And if they all
Yeah,
fill
for sure.
the same niche, that might be a bit concerning, I think.
Yeah, I feel like right now you kind of only play Outlaw. Like if you're like really pushing like at a competitive level, you kind of only play Outlaw in theater, like you said. And I'm just really hoping that we'll play Outlaw more. I have no clue about like Tazavesh upper and lower, like how that's gonna pan out. Like maybe it's gonna be an Outlaw dungeon, but it doesn't really change the bigger picture of like kind of sub just being the king in general for like high key pushing, as long as you have like the comp, right? Because it just does almost everything better apart from that low target cleave niche, which is like Sin and Outlaws specialty.
I will say though that the tier set for sub is making their cleave actually kind of okay.
Exactly.
It's still worse, but like that weakness is definitely not as apparent anymore. And subtlety just does more AoE. Like it's just the AoE spec for rogues, and now the cleave isn't bad, and it does good single target, and it does good funnel.
Sub. Hey, listen, okay.
No.
I'm putting my fist down, okay. Sub is overpowered, okay. This shit's gotta go, okay. It's too good at everything, okay? I'm sick of this spec, okay? It's the best single target, it's the best funnel, it's the best AoE, and now it's like okay on cleave, okay? Fuck this spec. I hate it.
Yeah. If sub becomes the like a good enough spec in theater, I'm just scared that you never ever touch any spec if you're trying to be like, super competitive, right? I don't know, like it doesn't look bright like for the other specs really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. I think there will. I do believe that there will be a tuning patch in like the first heroic week, or maybe
100%.
after progression is over, and maybe that will address some of the issues. Maybe they'll make deeper daggers a whitelist after all, so you won't be able to dip on trinket damage or get extra damage out of these kind of mechanics. And I mean, it still remains to be seen exactly like how the pulls are going to be adjusted, because you can't really do like these massive pulls anymore that you used to, where subtlety just outshines both Outlaw and Assassination on raw AoE. Because with the relics being in there, you kind of got to play them at some point, or you got to not pull that specific pack they're attached to, and that means that you maybe won't be having these like 15, 20 target pulls anymore, where subtlety is just so much better than the other two specs.
I don't know. I think you'd be surprised. Like my initial impression was that it was almost the opposite, because many of the 3 mob packs that you used to do, where some of these other specs would shine, have been turned into basically 6 mob packs because the relics are in them. And then on top of that, like at least from what I could tell, like if you imagine like a standard high key route, like in Halls of Atonement, you either go left and you lust with the big pull over there, or you shot right and you go all the way right and you do a big pull over there. And these pulls still only have one relic in the pack generally, which is manageable. Like when you get 2, it gets a little bit scary, but that doesn't actually occur that as much as you would think it does. So for the most part, I think a lot of the pulls that you do now, you'll still be able to do next patch, I think. But I guess we will see.
Yeah, we'll see for sure.
You have probably played. Sorry.
I was gonna say, do the locations of the mobs change week by week, or are they static?
From what I can see, they're static.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I did it across multiple weeks, and they're in the same place.
And there's one for every boss.
Okay.
Which is kind of awkward.
That's definitely good in terms of pugging, I would say, because then you don't have to like think about we have to go left side in DOS just to get like the like firepower, like whatever, right? So it's gonna make pugging definitely just a lot smoother, I think.
Yes
but I was
and
gonna
no.
ask you, James, when it comes to the seasonal affix, since you played on PTR, how do you think the time investment like in killing the stuff versus the gain of the buffs, like what do you think it is compared to like current seasonal affix, like the tormentos? Like, do you think it's faster, or like how?
Yeah, I think it's faster. I think in general the dungeon timer will be a lot more lenient next season, and like for the most part, you don't actually really focus. Like what I could tell from Rogue is all that you have to do is make sure that one relic dies before the other ones, right? So all that really takes is like 2 ice lances and maybe 2 eviscerates, and then you just go about your normal day with like AoE or whatever, and you just basically like cleave them down. You don't even really focus it unless for some reason you need like the haste buff to survive
to kill the
or
pack.
earlier. Or something. Right. So, and you know, not only are you like not really spending any time on the seasonal affix like you were with the old one, but it's also giving you like just as much, if not more, damage than the old one did. So, I feel like the dungeon timers will be a lot more lenient. The only thing I'll say is like, I feel like certain bosses were made a lot easier last season because, like, for example, if you got the Sagadon shield, well, that made Zav like a lot easier because you'd have the shield up for every big stomp, right? So you wouldn't. It would help you go up like 1 more key level without getting one shot. And same with like maybe it's really good on the first boss in Sanguine Depths, but now you don't have that 20% shield anymore. So in that sense, it might be a little. Certain bosses could be more dangerous on Tyrannical, maybe. But in all, I think the key timers will be more lenient. You have more time.
Do you think you would ever want to like skip a pack because you don't want the seasonal affix? Like it's just a waste of time, so you want to just go past it and like shroud it, like we saw with Prideful?
Yeah, well, you know, in Miss, like a lot of people, they go to the 4-pack plus the Tormentor. They just like shroud there, you know. There is a seasonal affix like on the left, and there's like a weird a Bowbreaker and some other mobs. Like in my opinion, you still probably don't play that, even though it has the seasonal affix in it. So I think the bad trash before is for the most part still the bad trash now. There could be like a few pulls in some dungeons that change. But of course Tazavesh, who knows what Tazavesh.
Yeah, I think it'll depend. Like you'll just change the way you do the pull. You won't change the pulls. So if you want the buff, you'll just focus on the mob. So you get it during the pull, especially on bosses. If you don't want the buff, you'll just kind of ignore it. You'll only kill off the 2 relics that actually buff the enemies. Because it, like one of the relics gives the mobs a damage reduction, so you need to make sure that that one dies somewhat early. Otherwise, you'll waste a lot of the buff. But since you only get the buff after you kill the Automa, and some of them can be really annoying actually, with like the frontal that one-shots you, or the one that just blinks away all the time, so you can't really cleave on it. Yeah, if you want the buff, you'll make sure you kill everything quickly, and I mean that's something that Rogue is pretty good at, I think. And if you don't want the buff, then you'll just cleave them. And I mean, while we don't really benefit that much in our prior target capabilities, based on having 1 extra target, except for Subtlety when you jump from like 3 to 4 targets. But in general, it's not really a big gain for us, but it might actually be the play if you play a class like a Warlock on top of it, for example, or even a Mage. You should just have that 1 extra target for additional cooldown reduction or resource generation to just keep it alive as long as possible. And maybe that's where some of the time gain will be coming from. Not necessarily from the buff the mobs provide themselves, but just from having additional targets, allowing for better funnel, better cooldown reduction, or just generating extra resources.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of segues a little bit into the next point, which is more of an overarching idea with Mythic Plus in general, and sort of like a group mentality. But I wanted to kind of hit on when you mess up in a key, and in the next patch it could be like you accidentally kill the wrong buff, or you pull an extra pack, or you have a wipe to a boss. When something like that happens, how does your group sort of push past that and recover? Do you decide to pull more things together and risk it? Do you play it safe and just go for the completion and try again the next one? Do you just hearth out instantly and just go, we wipe to the boss, I guess that's it, GG? What's sort of the mentality that you guys go through, and what's the decision making that happens in the where you kind of have to make the call if you continue or not?
Honestly, that completely depends on like the key level and dungeon. Let's say you're doing like a wake. That is like probably the most known dungeon to be like very time lenient, right? Like even if you like have like 1 full wipe, even multiple full wipes depending on the key level, you can still time it So I think it does depend on the key level and dungeon. But saying that, it is very, very valuable to have like a person or like player in your team that is like good with timers, like splits, just when you kill bosses, etc. And then you can like assess, like, oh, do we have to go double pack instead of doing the normal just solo pack here, for example. So I think it just depends, and you have to assess it by just scenario by scenario, you know.
Who is that person in your group that kind of has those timers in his head?
Honestly, like basically all of my team members are like very, very good players, like all of them. But when it comes to timers, honestly, it's kind of split. I don't know who's the best with timers, but it's maybe Wildly, the mage.
You guys just kind of share
Andy.
responsibilities on that?
Yeah, but like a lot of the times they have different opinions. Like, oh, yo, we're about to deplete here, and the other person says, no, we're fine on time. What are you saying? Like, I honestly, I don't know who's the best actually. Like, thinking about it now, but I mean, it's still better than not having an opinion at all. I've mostly been playing. Well, since BFA, I was playing Outlaw Rogue, right? Which is known to not be like a cooldown class. And now in Shadowlands as well, I'm playing Sub Rogue, which is also, it's not really a cooldown class because in the sense that you don't care what you pull. So you don't think like, oh, will I have this cooldown up for this pack or like whatever.
Yeah.
So I never really have to think about like timers or like, you know, like routes. I didn't really care ever. As long as I'm doing my job, the timers didn't really matter. And I just like, you know, do as I'm told, kind of, you know?
Yeah, for sure. James, do you have a similar sort of dynamic going on in your groups?
Well, I'd say me and Nerf normally are the ones like keeping track of like the overall dungeon cadence. Like, are we good on time? Are we not good on time? Was our boss killed? Was our boss split fast or slow? But in general, the team is pretty in touch with normally where we're at, and if we're going quickly or slowly. And maybe it's not like some explicit like, oh, you know, maybe Billy doesn't say like, oh, we're going fast, but he might say like, oh, I didn't get as much CDR in my veins as I normally do. Like, we need to go quick or something like that. Like, and like a lot of times it's, I don't know, like you can play. I mean, with Monk was like a lottery class, right? So sometimes you would feel like you're just cruising, and then other times feel like you're going quite slow. And so fortunately, hopefully, we don't have to deal with that this season. But yeah, I say probably mean Nerf, I guess, generally. I mean, Nerf literally has something that tells him exactly how fast or slow we are, but he doesn't always share the information, I guess.
Like a split
I was actually going to ask about
he
that.
has a split, yeah.
Is that a weak aura or just like?
I don't actually know if it's a weak aura or an add-on, but it goes by key level, so it saves like, you know, our previous, it saves our best, and it shows the one that we just did relative to the previous and the best ever on that given key level.
Oh,
That's
so it's
kinda
like
hype.
splits.
That's pretty cool, actually.
It's
Yeah.
like splits that speedrunners use.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to ask.
Like, yeah, go
ahead. Do you think that this kind of tracking, because as you just said, like he's not always sharing that. Do you think that is something to do with potentially getting people to give up too early in a key that is still timeable, but people just disagree about it, and because they start arguing or at least discussing, you know, thinking about, worrying about, is this still timeable or not? They're more prone to making more mistakes, and that ultimately leads to a deplete?
Could be, I guess. I think a lot of times, I don't know, once you start doing high enough keys, a lot of times if there's one thing that goes somewhat wrong, the key could be over. And so, I don't know, like, I think most of the time you don't really gain information knowing whether the key is bricked or not a lot of the times anyways, because if you continue on with the key, even though it has a bricked timer, then you get practice, and you can practice the mechanics and how you would deal with the boss if you had a clean run. And then, you know, if the key is for sure bricked and you give up, then you get to be more time efficient, I guess. So I don't think That's the biggest
I guess it
consideration.
matters more when you're like actually gunning for the rank 1 keys, because then it's not
Yeah.
just a consideration of whether you time the key or not, but it's also just, you only have like 3 more days left in the push week.
Yeah.
You can only play 2 more hours today. Is it really worth spending another 20 minutes in this key to maybe time it, or just go again and hope you get the key another time?
Yeah. That's
In my experience, and I've played with pretty much everyone in the like high and plus community, like I've jumped from like group to group or just like pugging high keys in general. I feel like if someone says in the group that like, it's over, or like even though it isn't, I feel like it just makes people play worse. Like I feel like it's almost never a good idea to like say like, oh guys, we're not looking so good on time, we have to like go fast. It doesn't help. It's not like it's making people play better. And in those scenarios when you did mess something up, like a ninja pull, like that caused a wipe, like whatever, you just have to like try your best. Like really just try your best, focus on like what's ahead of you, and yeah, just don't look back on the mistake. Like I see a lot of people that like let's say someone died or like something, they instantly go and check the death log or whatever, but it doesn't help you at the moment, you just have to like keep going basically. So yeah,
I would agree with that.
Especially in like not world first 30 keys.
Yeah.
You can stumble many times in the dungeon and still just kind of muscle through it just because of gear inflation and tightening up in the later half of the dungeon.
Yeah, for sure. Ram, what you brought up is actually really interesting, where you think that people sort of get into their own head and play worse because they're trying to push and they're like, it's hard to time this key now after this wipe or whatever. Is that sort of the main mentality shift that you would want to see from the Mythic Plus community? I know that the Mythic Plus community specifically, like, really in their own heads sometimes about keys. Like there's a lot of people who will gun for IO and then be like, oh well, I'll take this 3800 or like 2830 hunter, but I won't take this 2275 mage, right? So like there's a lot of sort of little tidbits about the Mythic Plus community that you don't really get if you're a new player, where people are like, oh, really deep on the Mythic Plus score, they get in their own head, or just the general negativity, and the elitism around making groups. Like, I can't have a group if it doesn't have a rogue, a mage, and a hunter. I need a Windwalker monk. I won't take any healer except for an HPL, that kind of thing. What's the shift that you want to see the most from that?
That I want to see. Well, just speaking about like this season, and let's just branch into Subrogue in particular. I think that if you are pugging and you don't have like a pre-made group, a very like how do you say, like toxic, or like rather having expectations of a Subrogue, people in pugs, they only think about details like DPS, damage meter, like overall damage, right? But especially on a spec like Subrogue, that is completely the wrong how do you say it, the wrong
Perspective,
the wrong way to look at it basically. Like it's all about the prior damage and how, like, who you're dealing damage to basically as a sub rogue to like actually gain time in a key. And I think, yeah, I don't know, I just feel like it's probably a rough time for like sub rogues in pugs at the moment, to like they feel like they had to prove themselves, and it makes them play worse. And by playing worse, I mean basically using black powder when you don't need it or when you shouldn't, kinda, I feel like. When it comes to just in general comms and whatnot, the pugging scene is definitely it's very toxic. Like, if you don't have the absolute highest eye level, highest score, and you're playing what's considered a meta spec, you will literally not get invited to a key, which is very bad. And honestly, I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah, it's like the problem is that the entire problem is a community-made problem, and there's basically no way for Blizzard to ever fix an issue like this. It just needs to be like a community perception thing that changes. Like realistically, Outlaw isn't that much worse than Subtlety and keys. Obviously, when you're pushing 30 keys, you're going to take every little advantage that you can. Subtlety has, more damage, it's more single target, has priority. But like Outlaw isn't that bad. Like you can do basically every single key in the game, probably at a 25 if you're doing it optimally with Outlaw. It's just the perception that, Subtlety is this, 3 times better spec, so people need to play it. And it's kind of existed forever, and it exists in every game. And it's unfortunate, but it's super hard to fix, right?
Yeah, it's like this notion that if you see a certain amount of or a certain class at the top, that automatically means that all the classes you don't see must be bad, right? Even though that's not really what happens. If even a world first in the world first race, just because you see certain classes being stacked for a specific boss doesn't mean that all the classes that aren't being stacked are unplayable on that boss. They might literally just be 1% behind, but because people are min-maxing to this degree, they're obviously picking the one that is 1% better. And so they see a mage, they see the sub-rogue, and they think, oh, Outlaw and Assa must be bad, right? And then a community perception shift doesn't really happen, even if these classes are perfectly balanced to the same level, because everyone will still keep playing what was already good instead of switching to the other thing that is just as good but not better. And so it's just this attitude of the class that you don't see must be bad. You don't see Feral or Enhancement in the top keys, so they must be bad. Even though all you know when you see a Frost Mage, a Windwalker, and a Rogue is these 3 classes are really good. But you don't actually know how good all the other classes that you aren't seeing are. So sometimes it just takes the guts from like an individual player and a team to stick to their guns. They know they have a really good player. If you have like a really good Resto Druid, which is by a lot of people considered to be unplayable on high keys, but there's still people who are making it work in 28s, 29s. So clearly it's possible. You just gotta believe in yourself when you play this class, or hopefully find people and surround yourself with people that are willing to give you that chance, right? To succeed even playing something that is not considered meta or optimal.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I remember one example in Nilotha. Sally probably remembers. Do you remember the one team at the very start of Season 3 that was playing an Enhanced Shaman?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I remember for like a week, everyone was talking about everybody was like, "Oh, Enhance is insane, Sundering. It's like an AOE gouge. It's broken." It's like I think something that's really interesting about WoW is that every single class kind of like does something that like not other classes can do. Like, Outlaw has like the gouge, the blinds, and the the kidneys. Rogue has or like a sub has like the cheap shot spam potentially. Like every spec kind of has their own little like set of quirks that make them uniquely special. And if you're a good enough player, like most specs are probably able to do a 28. It's just about can you find a group, can you get the time, like is it worth the effort? But yeah, it sucks. It sucks that the community perception basically is the only thing that causes people to think this way.
Speaking about Sully's point when it comes to like the meta and stuff, it is kind of funny that before this season, no one was really pushing the highest keys as Prot Paladin or Resto Shaman, and now look where we have come, basically, right? Like it was all about Guardian Druid at the start and Holy Paladin, right? Nothing else was played. And then you just have like good players that just try it and they see like, oh shit, this actually works. So I'm hoping we just see something new like next patch, next season, next tier. Yeah, I'm excited for sure.
Yeah,
I'd be happy just seeing less Windwalker. I'll be completely honest.
Selly the Windwalker hater.
It's not exactly that I hate Windwalker. It's just like whether you play sub, outlaw, or Assa in a key, and you work your ass off, and you're trying to make things happen, and you're contributing, right? Like you do a big pull in DOS, and you funnel the Death Speaker, or the Elder Horn or whatever to make sure that mobs die evenly, and like you feel like you're contributing, but then you look at the meter and you're doing 30k, and the monk is doing 150k. And you feel like, okay, like what did I actually do to make this like actually like the really difficult pulls are the ones where you don't really feel like you're contributing all that much. Sure, you're interrupting, sure you're disrupting mobs with cheap shots or whatever, and you're making sure that the prio target that is smacking the tank is taken care of as quickly as possible, and you're saving time doing prio damage instead of AoE. But at the end of the day, that pack is melting within 15 seconds, not because of anything you did. that pack is melting because the monk got 3 procs, and
Yeah.
that feels a bit awkward because it undermines, as Ram just said, it undermines the gameplay experience you have when you play the game, and it also creates this environment where people feel more and more forced to compete on something that's not even their niche, that's not even their duty in the group.
Yeah.
You'll never pick a rogue for their AoE damage, but when you see other classes go absolutely ham on the meters on these really big pulls, it's hard not to feel like you need to contribute in some way as well. And the only way to contribute on the big AoE pulls is by doing AoE damage as well. And then you press the black powder, and at the end of a dungeon, you kind of feel bad about it because, I mean, you don't really want black powder to be your highest damaging finisher, except in like two keys maybe. So
Yeah. I just feel like it just leads you to possibly play worse. I've been playing Rogue since BFA. Like I've been playing a lot of keys, like basically every season, and I've just learned to like totally let go of my ego. And when it comes to like Rogue, I'm like a utility class, and then I don't care about DPS anymore. That's kind of just my view on it. I don't mind doing less damage as long as I know myself that I'm bringing something to like the group, like having control or doing prior damage to like kill a target faster, either if it's depending on it, if it's dangerous for like the tank or like whatever, or just for a dungeon timer, like speed in general. Yeah.
Something that's
it
really
does feel
useful.
odd though, playing a utility or like a supporting role on a class that is kind of not a utility or support class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that's useful though is on details. There's a option in the settings where you can always show yourself on the damage meters, so you don't feel inadequate. It's really useful for raid as well. So make sure
Yeah.
to turn that on.
Yeah, there's like a meme or something with you know, some washed up outlaw rogue on it.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So the last topic I want to get to before we go into a Q&A is sort of a mixture. Maybe James can start this one off, of just some general preparation and tips for Mythic Plus for people trying to get into it, people trying to push higher keys. How do you kind of get into those higher keys? How do you kind of make sure that you're doing the best you can before you get into the and not just the best that you can in the
I think, I think it's actually pretty valuable to watch when people do hierarchies. And I mean, there's a lot of rogues you can watch, right? Even besides just me and Ram. Like if you just go to the WoW page on Twitch and then you scroll down, there are people streaming plus 25s and 24s and stuff, and if you're only doing 10s or 15s or something, then there's like a bunch you could still learn from these other players. And I think the biggest thing is to like, earlier we were talking about the whole thing with the meta situation and everything, but I feel like not enough players are like trying to make friends. Like at the end of the day, it's an MMO, and you're going to be significantly more successful if you are trying to play with people regularly instead of pugging, because not only like will it make you a better player to play with the same team, but it's just more fun, and you won't have to sit in queue for as long. So like my biggest suggestion is like every time you go into a key, if you play with anybody who's even remotely good, like a tank that is not dying and they're making good pulls and they already have their route, or like a healer that somehow keeps you alive when you thought you were gonna die, like just always add these people and then ask them at the start of the day when you log in, like, do you want to do keys, and try to go that route before you pug, and should be a lot better end result for you.
Yeah, I've always told people that WoW as a single player game is not that great. But join a guild, talk to people, make friends, and the game is like 50 times better.
Yeah, I sort of have a similar thing because last expansion I was a heroic Andy. Like I did my 15s, I did my AOTC. Maybe I killed like 3 bosses in Mythic, and that's sort of it. And this tier was actually my first cutting edge, 9-1. So I've sort of been on that fence where I'm doing 10s, 15s, and I'm like I could push higher, but I don't really want to put the time into it. And I've timed 21s and stuff now, and I'm getting there. but I think the main thing is, like James said, like socializing is honestly huge. I still have people that I did keys with in Nyalotha who are just hitting me up, and they're like, "Hey, you want to do a 23 DOS?" And I'm like, "I don't have time. I have work in a half hour, but thanks for the invite." And just running with your guild. Like if you're in a mythic guild, especially, you already know that you're with 20 people who are pretty solid. And out of those 20 people, you could make a Mythic Plus group. Like you could run keys with. So like something that I've always tried to do is like be on before a raid, like an hour before raid, see who's on and be like, hey, you want to do a quick key before raid? Or if you're on farm and you end your raid early, you're like, hey, we raid 3 days, but we're clearing the raid in 2. Do you guys want to use that 3rd day to do some keys? That sort of stuff where you kind of start making friendships and you start getting into a groove with people, and you make your social group into a key running group. That sort of thing is very important in my opinion. But yeah, unless we have anything else that we want to add that's super important, we'll toss it over to a question and answer. I have a couple things going on here, a couple questions. So yeah, anything else that you guys want to add?
I would say maybe I feel like a lot of rogues that are just like, if you're like if your goal is to do higher and higher keys, I would be to focus more on the fundamentals than your damage, right? Like, don't worry about the overall number at the end of the dungeon, but like if there's a very important stop which you're regularly assigned to, like make sure that that's never going off, or just try and improve your awareness before and make sure you're good there before you're like worrying about oh, could I have done 1% more DPS or something like that. You know what I mean? I think that's pretty big. But other than that, not really.
Yeah, definitely. Like you're very unlikely to like deplete keys just due to pure output. Like let's say you just played really well and you still deplete, and you deplete just to DPS. That's very unlikely. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how many keys do you have where you end the run with 0 deaths, with like no missed interrupts, and you missed the timer by like 2 seconds because you weren't doing enough DPS? That's
Never.
maybe 1 out of 200 runs or something like that, probably.
Yeah.
Usually the run ends way earlier because something else was played badly, or just didn't work out the way it was supposed to, or the strategy didn't work out.
Yeah, miss kick or stop. That's
yeah.
probably the most
For me
common
personally,
one. Sure.
this may sound weird, but make friends with the tank, because he's kind of the only one that actually notices what you're doing well as a rogue. If you're doing all the correct stops, if you're doing all the interrupts and you cover for people making mistakes, if you switch to crippling when it's needed, because he starts tanking and maybe the mage is dead or something like that, the tank is kind of the only one who's actually going to notice that, because the other DPS, they won't. Maybe the healer will, but it's unlikely. But the tank will be very thankful for you for doing what you're doing, even if it's not DPS. So, and everyone wants a good tank. So if you're good friends with all the tanks, then the tanks will get you in as well.
Definitely.
I don't know if anyone else touched on this before, but just speaking about stops in general, focus macros, it is absolutely insane. I don't know if anyone said it already, but yeah, using just focus and having focus macros in general, it's just the key to M+, really. Even in raid, like I use focus macros, but in keys, it's way more important because there's like a lot more moving parts, stops and kicks. Yeah. Totally recommend getting that if you don't already use it, for sure.
So our first question here is from Ash Kitten, who asks, do you think any of the Rogue Covenant abilities could be implemented in the next expansion, perhaps as a talent? And what Covenant ability, like the shared ones like Soul Shape and Fleshcraft, do you enjoy most?
Brandon, do you want to go?
Yeah, for me, definitely in M+, it has to be Fleshcraft. I think it is just by far the best Covenant defensive, or whatever you want to call it, because it just gives you a shield, and if you are playing Merolef, for example, you can even get some extra buffs. I think Emily is just about. It just does some damage if you use Fleshcraft or whatever. When it comes to Covenants, I haven't used. It has to be Nightfade, the Soul Shape. Definitely, I would love to see Soul Shape being used more, or like next expansion. I think at least when it comes to Rogue, I don't really feel that Door of Shadows is that useful, unless you're like waiting for a specific mechanic to happen and then like use the Gap Closer. Let's say you cannot Shadow Step or whatever, you have to like use Door of Shadows. But in terms of like actual mobility on Rogue, Door of Shadows, it's not that good. Yeah, let's just put it like that.
Yeah, you can kind of you can maybe like precast it when an ability is coming, like second boss halls or something. Like you precast the Door of Shadows to bait one of the zones outside, and you Shadow Step back instantly just because you can, and you're not gonna use Door of Shadows in any other way in any for any reason, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, or
I mean,
maybe like the spider boss in Plaguefall, where you can actually cover the mobs that are far away just because you happen to be went here and you happen to be able to use Door of Shadows.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree. Soul Shape just for the. I was actually expecting you to say Soul Shape because I know how much you like just running around in different Soul Shapes. Not for the
Yeah.
movement part of it, but just the aesthetic
The
reasons.
mental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Are you gonna
cosmetic
look
is definitely a big part for me. That's for sure.
Yeah, you're looking forward to soul shaping into a brutal saw mid rate and just like soul shaping
Yeah.
over an important mechanic.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a big fan of using these reflective prisms just to like spread the joy, you know, in the raid.
Yeah.
So everyone can have. I was maining Hunter, right, and I had the frog soul shape, and I was making everyone on a frog in raid.
Yeah. Isn't there a hippo strat as well?
Yeah, we have one
Yep,
with
yep,
hippos.
yep.
Yep.
There's a bunch of good ones for sure.
But for the actual like at least for the actual like ability, like the damage ones, I really like Serrated Bone Spike and Echoing Reprimand. The other two are kind of, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I
But
think
you
that
actually like Echoing Reprimand.
I love Echoing Reprimand. It's my
What the
favorite.
fuck is
code.
wrong with you, dude?
he's always enjoyed it,
I
man.
love it. I liked it when it was in beta and everyone said it was the worst Covenant ability. I liked it from day one.
I mean,
okay?
it was and it still is, dude.
Hey, you're a hater, okay?
Fringe Lord.
Dude, it's so sick. It costs 10 energy.
I mean, sure, but do you like it because it's a high combo point builder for low energy cost, or do you actually like the combo point minigame? Because that to me is like the big issue with Echoing Reprimand. I like that it actually feels like a button that is worth pressing just for the damage. Flagellation kinda is too, but it's like over time, so you don't really notice it. But I mean, ER definitely hits hard. We all remember, you know, like Korean Rogues at the beginning of Shadowlands having a lot of fun in arenas, just because of ER. But do you actually like think that the minigame is designed to an extent where it works well with the specs? Or do you think that that's something that can be improved or should be improved if we take it into a next expansion?
I really like it overall because, so like, generally speaking, all of the rogue specs have a very, you know, one-dimensional, you know, kind of interaction with combo points where you build all the way to the max and then you know, cast a finisher. I really like that Echoing Reprimand makes you kind of pay attention to your combo point meter in more ways than just fill, dump, where, you know, like, oh, you know, especially because the duration of the buff lasts so long, you have 45 seconds to land on the correct combo point. You're usually going to land it. I don't know. I really like when games make you think about resources in different ways, and Echoing Reprimand does that for me. So I really like that ability.
Mm.
I do want to kind of push this along. We got one more question just added that I think is cover. So the next one is from Iceblades. And his question is, what are some key skills to target and build on or to practice when making the transition from like a 15, 16 Keystone Master Andy to pushing 20s and 25s and all that? How different are the skills compared to a raid encounter where things are like the same every single pull and you're, you know, trying to blast the boss more?
I would say it's definitely a lot. I mean, I feel like there's a lot more moving parts in M Plus compared to Raid, and once you start getting up like higher and higher key level, it becomes a lot more important to. Well, first of all, you have to be on voice if you want to have a higher success rate. To have communication about calling like backups and whatnot, like what's gonna happen next and so on. But It's definitely like James said earlier. It's about doing your job, which is basically stops, kicks, or like having to fix a patrol or whatever. It's just about doing your jobs properly. When you're playing these 15, 16s, especially like end game gear, you don't have to kick anything. Nothing will kill you. Like you just DPS and you will time the key. Like really. But it becomes more important to like do proper jobs once you start doing higher and higher keys. Yeah.
James, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean that's the main thing. Like, I think there are certain things that people, and it's hard to like build the. I don't know what's the right way to think about it, but it's hard to form like the neural connections that something is dangerous if you aren't used to playing in the environment where it's dangerous. So like I'll see like a lot of people, maybe they have, like just the other day I was playing with a healer and she had only done, I don't know, like plus 23s and stuff. And then we brought her into a plus 27 and you could tell that there were certain mechanics that she was probably had been like taking for granted in the 23 because it wasn't as punishing. But then, if you stand in the rapid fire for one tick too long in the 27, well, you just die. And if the healer dies, then everybody dies, right? So and another thing I'll see like a lot of lower ranked players do, like Ram mentioned, is like on the first boss halls, for instance, the patrol could be coming and stuff like that. And I rarely ever see like other rogues like have that in their presence of mind to like distract the patrol before it's too late, right? So they're just like you just want to be focused on the main point. Like the main focus should not be on your DPS, right? It should be on everything else besides your DPS. And I think a lot of times people get it wrong. And it probably has to do with like at the end of the day, like rogue doesn't do that much damage. So if you're doing even less damage than not that much damage, then it doesn't look good in your pugs or for whatever reason. I don't know. But if you actually want to get better, you have to pay attention to the things that are going to scale, like the things that actually matter at the end.
Definitely. The next question comes from TMB, who asks, do you think the community suffers from trying too hard to optimize everything, like pooling for shiv windows or certain like omega 0.3% talent combinations? And should some kind of focus be put into teaching players better as opposed to what's numerically the best option? Or do you think that that's just a community thing where, people will just want to play what's best?
I personally think yes, because like too much emphasis, and it's not like you the people at the Rogue Discord or whatever like pushing an agenda or anything, but it's more that this like 0.1% damage is irrelevant if you are still playing at the level where you still die to swirlies on the ground or certain other things, and so it's like important to like know in the back of your head like certain fundamentals, but it's like you got to walk before you can run, right? I think like it's almost irrational in a sense to be like obsessing over 10 DPS if there are other more glaring issues. Like 9 times out of 10, if people paid that extreme level of detail to non-DPS related things, they would almost always be a better player than if they cared about the non-DPS related things like they do right now, and then like the way they currently go about the game. So that's the only reason I say that too much detail is paid to it. But I don't know.
I'm trying to sub.
But my sim
No,
DPS.
I'm not trying to, yeah, I'm just if people want to get better, it's hardly ever about the DPS.
Yeah, it's about
agree.
teaching yourself skills, like soft skills, whether it's like the social aspect that we already talked about earlier, or just, making sure that you're interrupting correctly. It doesn't matter if you're doing the highest DPS out of any rogue in the world if you miss like 5% of your interrupts. A good group, when they're actually looking towards, playing the game more competitively, they will always prioritize the rogue that they remember has never ever fucked up a single interrupt. Or rather, they will remember the rogue that messed up a few keys because he wasn't paying attention to these fundamentals. And best part about this is that even when maybe you're not like a one-trick pony like myself, these skills that are not DPS related, they actually translate into other classes as well. They translate into raid, into PvP. They're not just about Mythic Plus. They're about every content in the game. They're about other games as well. And focusing on your DPS rotation, focusing on doing your opener like picture perfect, frame perfect, that's going to be what, 10 DPS? But knowing how to work in a team, how to work in a team environment, how to communicate properly, and how to make sure that the really important stuff is being taken care of, not with like 98%, 99% success rate, but 100%. That's ultimately the difference between playing in the top 5% or in the top 0.5%.
Yeah, I definitely, basically for like every single game that I've ever played, I've always just had the perspective that you should focus on fundamentals more so than actually like maximizing a theoretical gain, like understanding, what mobs need to be kicked, stunned, blinded, when to hold cooldowns, like that stuff is way more valuable than like, oh, there's this talent, legendary rotation, covenant combination that's like, 0.5% better, but like, if you just like knew into kidney shot, you'd probably be a better player.
Yeah, for sure.
So
So you're basically telling me I don't have to play Ghostly Strike in M+, yeah?
Yeah, dude, get rid of Ghostly Strikes. We're going back to Deathly Shadows. It's all
Oh,
No
yeah.
more Marked for Death, back to BFA.
Yeah,
Blood.
Vigor's back on the menu. Yeah, it's all Vigor, Quick Draw, Deathly Shadows, Dancing Steel. There you go.
But I mean, if you think back to beginning of Shadowlands, right? Like both Spear and I, we both played Vigor, even though we knew it was bad because we were
Yep.
just comfortable playing it,
It
right?
feels better, yeah?
People always assumed, oh, they must be playing it because it's better numerically. But oftentimes you will see people play like even in the discussion of like subtlety, like the premeditation versus weapon master is still a debate that happens here or there. And oftentimes it doesn't come down to, oh, I play this because it's better, but I play this because it makes me more comfortable. And
Yeah.
if you're comfortable, then you'll do more DPS than playing the ideal setup that you just don't know really how to play consistently.
Yeah, exactly. That's what more or less what I've always said. Like top players will use stuff sometimes that is like theoretically, mathematically, sometimes 1% worse. But if they like it, who really cares? They're doing freak keys anyway, so I mean they're better than us, right?
And then the last question that we got is from Ikerstream, who asks, do you think it's valuable to record your own gameplay? And if so, what are you looking at when reviewing a VOD?
Are you speaking about logs or video?
Video mostly. Obviously,
Video.
logs are very important. Mythic Plus logs, a little bit less so. They're kind of hard to read, from my experience at least. But I think that a VOD for Mythic Plus is important.
Yeah, for sure. As long as you have, I think if you're gonna like record yourself, it's quite important to have like an action tracker so you can see actually what you pressed and whatnot, as well as let's say kick tracker, CC tracker, like maybe party cooldown trackers, and then you can actually like see and analyze like what happened, what can we do better in like whatever scenario. I feel like if you don't have some of these things, it's kind of hard to evaluate or analyze like what you could have done better. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, I think doing it by yourself doesn't really help in the context of Mythic Plus either. Like you can look at your own VOD from a key that you depleted, and it's very unlikely that you'll notice something that you feel you could have done better to avoid like the situation that led to a wipe, for example. But doing that as a group is way more impactful because not only do you get like different perspectives, but you also just have people remember what led to the wipe ultimately from their perspective, and then you can collaborate, and that's what M+ is ultimately about in the 5-man setting. You can talk about like who would have been the best person to do it, because oftentimes when something bad happens and you want to avoid that situation happening in the future, multiple people could have done something to prevent it, but it's important to really figure out who is it going to be. If an interrupt was missed and you had like 3 or 4 different disrupts ready, you don't really want everybody to just use that disrupt freely, but you want to assign a rotation as like in your group on who is using it. And if you're not doing that during the run because no one really is capable of calling that out as it happens, you at least want to have like sort of a priority list. And as Ram just said, of course you need to be able to track that during live gameplay as well as when analyzing the VOD. But you also want to make sure that you're like figuring out improvements not by yourself ideally, but with a group. The only way that a VOD analysis I think for M+ would really be meaningful by yourself is when you're basically just pugging all the time. But as James said earlier, by far the best way to improve both as a player and as a group, obviously, and increase your RIO if that matters to you individually, is playing with the same people or with the same group of people all the time. You're gonna have more fun, and you're gonna be able to analyze your own mistakes better because you're not just looking for them by yourself.
Just a very quick point regarding the if you can do anything better as a group. A thing that I've seen, especially in high and plus pugging, is that people love to talk about it mid-key when the key is not even over, and that is definitely not the move. Like that is for when the key is over, or like when you actually just okay, let's go out, or like next key after that. Don't talk about optimization unless you're doing something extremely like very like relaxing, like nothing special is going on. I feel like I see that a lot, and it's a very bad habit. Like it just kind of makes people lose focus. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
It's the same for raid. That drives me crazy when like it's prog and like somebody dies and then like some random person calls out that like we should wipe and it's just like, what are you talking about? It's not even close to being over yet.
Yeah.
I have one question for everybody. Okay, the final question. What rogue spec are you playing? What rogue spec are you playing on Heroic Week?
Are we not allowed
Is
to
that
play
a
multiple?
rhetorical question?
No,
or...
you have to pick one. You have to pick one and stick
Only
with it.
one.
I'll start it off. I'm gonna play Sin because I want to. That's about it. I just played sub for a whole tier, and I'm kind of getting sick of it. So back to Sin it is with my ass.
It's a different response for me. I'll play Assassination because that's the name of the spec. It's not called Sin. I'm pretty sure we clarified that like 2 episodes ago already.
Fuck off,
That is true,
man.
yeah.
I'll be playing Fury Warrior because rogues don't have Rallying Cry for Heroic Week.
True.
Nice.
What about Ram? What's Ram playing?
I wish I could say Outlaw, but until we have the fun stuff, I think I will stick with Kieran Sub just to like unrust because I haven't played it in a while. So I'll most likely just be playing that because I'm the least comfortable on it. Like I feel like all the other specs I can play fine, you know. So yeah, I'll play Kieran Sub most likely.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna be playing Outlaw because like Heroic Week is like the week that I use to like test stuff. Like because like obviously the single target patchwork sims are only tell so much of the story. So maybe Outlaw's secretly broken. Cope. So
I hope so.
Somebody's got to put their neck on the line and try to figure it out. Okay.
Yeah.
On the quick topic of testing things out, I do want to do a quick shout out. We do have a spreadsheet of rogue defensives called the Book of Shadows. If you are raiding and you cloak something and you're like, oh shit, this works, or like you feint something and you're like, that should work but doesn't, you think it's weird, go ahead and submit it. There's a Google form. I'm gonna post a link into the chat right now. That's the link to the doc. Google form link is in there. It helps us because we don't have to test everything on our own. Just be really helpful,
Yeah, it's a nice collaborative effort from like all rogues for all rogues, because usually it takes like weeks to figure out everything, especially when it comes to the later bosses in the raid. And I mean, if everybody helps out and submits a couple of these things, then by Mythic Week 2 or 3, maybe we'll already know, okay, these mechanics we can cloak, and these mechanics we can feint, and then everybody can benefit from the knowledge for sure.
Yeah, it's also useful for like if you're entering a progression boss and then you're like, oh, does cloak work on this? You don't even need to test it. You just open up the Google Doc. It'll tell you if it does or doesn't. So it's a super useful resource, and it's only really useful when people actually contribute. So.
Yep.
And with that, I think we are out of time. So I'd like to thank James and Ramfam, of course, for coming on, spending their valuable time giving insight. Of course, Selly, Guy, you guys are always here. You guys are worthless to me.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll try and do another one maybe next month after the race. Get some raid stuff going. Yeah.
Cool.
Mm.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
But yeah, no, it's super interesting to hear both James and Ram's perspective on a lot of things. Thanks for sitting down with those guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for having me.
coming on,
Thanks for
guys.
having us.
Thanks.
All right, and thanks everyone for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Nice. That was fun.
That was fun. Yeah.
Yeah.